the biggest opportunity with AI today is?
Building slowly but surely, building on top of whatever you've tried. So you can build simply and then build on top of each thing that you're building consequentially.
Welcome to the Success Revenue Podcast, where AI meets leadership and real business impact, from the Middle East to the world. This is the show for leaders navigating how AI is unlocking human impact and reshaping how businesses grow.
We are your host, Ivy Ferrero, executive leader and speaker, and Haider Al-Sad, CEO of Nebulous, where businesses build and deploy AI agents. Join us for another conversation on this episode. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the podcast. We're super excited for today's guest. And before I give a quick introduction, as always, a quick reminder, please, for everyone listening, don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and so on. We appreciate that, and we appreciate your support to the show. And today we're extra excited because we have a guest with us all the way from my old hometown in Los Angeles in California, USA. Coming to us and bringing her expertise is Jan Young, who's the founder of multiple things. I'll go through a few of them here. Jan Young CX, where she works with executives and provide executive coaching to help them further their careers and development. Jan has also started two communities, Step Up Exchange, which is a private project-based executive learning community for, again, those executives are looking to really take that next level and work with their peers where she helps lead that. And in the early days when I got to know Jan, and she's still running, is CX Exchange, which is a volunteer-led community of over 4,000 people in customer success with varied backgrounds and levels of experience. And that community, I know, personally has helped a ton of people in their development and career. So Jan, outside of that, also an operator with long experience in leadership and across different industries and verticals. So we're super excited to have you here. Welcome to the show, and welcome to this global audience that I know is excited to listen to you.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for asking me. I was so excited when I saw that you started this podcast, and I've been following it closely. So thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
I'm such a fan, Jan. I'm definitely such a fan. So I'm so excited to have you here.
Awesome.
Great to have an excuse to finally meet you, Ivy.
Excellent. And so like I said, we're excited to go through today's conversation. There's a ton of topics we want to touch on, but why don't we maybe start off lightly here? Tell us a little bit more where you're currently based. I mentioned Los Angeles, you're always on the road, but tell us about your background, domain, journey to where you are today.
Yeah. I guess I've hopped around just a little bit in terms of home bases. I've been based in the Bay Area, in San Francisco area, New York, and LA. I was never going to move to LA, but came here first for a job and then stayed here for my husband. So he's actually from New York, but he likes the weather here. And, you've been here. It's easy living, right? So
Definitely.
As long as you're not in the traffic, it's
Exactly.
a okay place to stay. But so in tech, though, I've worked in project, account management, sales, marketing, professional services, my true level, so CS. And, that's really helped me get a cross-functional perspective on what we're doing in tech. And I think really my favorite role is CS because it's at that intersection between the customer and the company. I think it's been very helpful to understand kind of the whole customer journey and, from, marketing all the way through, as a prospect and what's happening with the customer all the way through. Yeah, I guess I bring that with me in everything that I continue to explore in what is a vastly changing, very quickly changing tech marketplace now with AI. So it's an exciting place to be, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, fast changing and developing is the understatement right now. I think it's just going
Wow.
the lightning speed. And with that in mind, I was going to ask, tell us about your current role and what you're doing today, but you have multiple roles and you're leading multiple initiatives. Speak to us about those different things that you're doing today, what they
Sure.
entail, and kind of where you're kind of putting most of your effort today.
Yeah, well, I've been advising either founders or CS leaders for some time now. I guess what really sort of changed is when I started CX Exchange by mistake, really by accident. I don't know if it was by mistake, but certainly by accident. It was just over 4 years ago. I was in an interim VP of CS role at a fintech company, needed to hire my replacement, a bunch of different roles. I did a post on LinkedIn and I said, I listed all the roles. Well, everyone wanted to meet with me, right? To just like ask about the role. And so it was, I guess, about 80 people reached out, and that would have taken a full week. So I started an office hour. And then because there were so many different people that I knew who were in that meeting, and I knew that some of the questions that were coming up, because we were not just talking about what it was at that company, because not all people were going to be able to get jobs at that company. We started talking about CS more generally. And so I started to facilitate the conversation and bringing people, into the conversation who had perspectives. And then everyone wanted to come back the following week. So we just, kept meeting. And then one week I couldn't make it because I was traveling. And another leader raised their hand and said, "Oh, well, that's okay. I can take it this week." And that was pretty much how it was born and just kind of kept continuing. And now we have not only I think we have we have a board of like 15 or 20 different volunteers that lead the community, because if you want to start something, you basically it's like, okay, here's a platform for you to do it. But what I've also learned through that process is when people are exchanging ideas, how much they learn by sharing as well as by asking, and how everyone who's participating in that learns. And so that's what really led me to start Step Up Exchange, because I understood that it wasn't just enough to coach somebody through something. And also, there's a lot that I was like sort of same information that I was sharing again and again. I wanted to get that recorded and down, because there's some fundamentals, mostly around questions. I think the most fundamental things these days are questions, because everything else is changing, right? But but in any event, so I have some things that are recorded, but it really is through the exchange between the leaders as well as my guidance and some of the information that I shared that sort of has been the foundation. And the other thing about Step Up Exchange, the CS Business Leadership Accelerator, is that I started off doing it as sort of like this 12-week cohort, because it seemed like that's what you do. That's what I saw around me was 12-week cohorts. But I realized that what we really needed was a year. So the learning part is like you can pretty much do in like 10 weeks. But the guidance from me and the exchange between the executives happens throughout the year. And so that's really where I've landed with it, and I feel really good about it now. I really like all of the building with AI that everyone's doing, the way that everyone's stepping up as business leaders, which I think we really have to now. And it's just been a fun experience for me as well. Like I like to kind of dabble in things that I enjoy. So yeah, so that's why then, and then with Jan Young CX, I still do, my advising and executive coaching directly through that. So that's why I've got these three different brands, because they're functionally, three different things. Although there's a lot more crossover between Jan Young CX and Step Up Exchange, probably. Yeah, I know it's confusing for everyone to have these three different brands, but I think they're all really just vitally important. And I'm so excited that CX Exchange is in its fourth year, and that I can still support what everyone's doing and coming together there, whether it's in the Slack channel or in our events. Anyway, I'm rambling now. So,
No, no,
but,
it's cool. And they
but
all fill different functions, like you said, different
yeah.
audiences and different people really that are benefiting from them. So I think it makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
And John, when I was hearing you talk, all I kept on hearing was a person that has a curiosity and follows that curiosity. And
Mhm.
what I find interesting is that I've been hearing a lot about the having a non-linear career path, right? And
Oh, yeah.
just basically
Mhm.
going into different things and learning as much as you can from that, and then trying out something different. And how in the age of AI, this is what is going to like help you set yourself apart. Not more, we're not doing any more of the special work, because the specialty work can actually be given to AI. Now what matters is that you're a generalist. So I love that you have such a big experience in different fields. And it sounds like you have been an operator, a leader, and a community builder throughout your entire career. What are things you have learned across these different roles and domains?
Ooh, what have I learned across the different roles and domains? I think well, when you talk about curiosity, I think that's something that is a vital skill and quality that I think everyone needs to have right now. It's not a time to say, I don't, or I never, or I can't. This is a time to really explore and to allow yourself to try. If you feel like, well, I'm technical, I don't do that business stuff. This is a time for you to learn and understand, go to market and business and customer economics and that sort of thing. When I say customer economics, not in like some sort of formulas and that sort of thing, really just understanding the dynamics, right? But then on the other side, if we've always been on go to market and it's like, well, I don't do that technical stuff. This is a time where it's not first of all, it's very easy to learn these things because you speak to a machine instead of having to, um, really learn, all the specifics of coding, right? But also, I think it's just understanding how the machine works and how best to architect, the information that you want to share, with AI. These kinds of things are really important if you want to be effective at your job and at any job that you're doing. And so I really want to just encourage people to open up, and anything that you find yourself saying I can't or I don't, really question that and give yourself the opportunity to try. And especially if nothing else, just talk into an LLM and it'll guide you through it. As long as you have the patience to go through the steps, you can figure it out. That's a really exciting thing that's changed most recently, right? I mean, not just since, ChatGPT days, but even in the last 6 months, what we can do with AI and building agents is so easy now. You can literally just go to Claude Cowork and it feels like a chat, but you're building an agent, so there's almost no
It's
excuse, right?
It's insane. We live in such an incredible time of opportunity. With AI, one of the things that I have also noticed is that there's a deeper need for people to connect in community, right? So I definitely have a lot of respect for people who are community builders. I have personally attended some of your CX exchange.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
but the timing is always, sometimes I have to see because I have a son, and so at nighttime is I need to put him to sleep. So because it always happens like morning time in the US and
Yeah,
nighttime here. But I
yeah.
definitely have appreciated those events that you host almost like on a weekly basis. And you were telling us about how you kind of have noticed that people learn really good when they're like in group setting. They can share, and it's a safe space for them. Is there anything else that has shaped your view on community building as you have built CX Exchange?
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny, that's why for the CS Business Leadership Accelerator, that's why I call it an accelerator, because I think when you are exchanging ideas and you're applying it at work, then or even if you're in between roles, you're applying it just as you're building, like that really accelerates your learning. And so what I love about CX Exchange though is that this is a place where it's DIY, right? Like, what is, you decide what your path is. You decide, how you want to, what you want to focus on and what you want to create there. And so you can connect with people one on one. We have like, I think 5 or 6 different programs, where people can, just, attend or, get involved and organize. We have even, as many board members that we have even more volunteers, and in fact, actually, we need a newsletter writer. If somebody wants, we have, someone who's moving on from that. We have 2 people who work on the newsletter, and but the other thing too, I think when you get involved and engaged, and you're working with people in these different ways, I was just talking to someone yesterday about this. That when you give, you get so much more back in return, and I think that that's something that sometimes people don't fully recognize. When they join these different communities, they just think about receiving from it. But it's truly, I think, when you start to volunteer and give, and that's why I'd like to keep CX Exchange as a volunteer community. People have said, well, you should monetize it, you should charge for it, and this sort of thing. And it's like, but the dynamics of when people getting involved and helping to make something happen, that's where there's so much value created, And so I guess I feel like as long as people want to volunteer and make it happen, then I want to support and keep it going. And, like I
Wow.
said, it's been over 4 years now. So, see how
Sure.
long people want to keep it going.
Yeah.
So
No,
beautiful.
yeah, that's great. And it gets me thinking a little bit. We're talking about AI, and I have a question about AI on the leaders side. But
Yeah.
from a community perspective, in a world that's getting a lot more digital, in a sense, right, with AI doing all of our work, and we're deploying AI agents everywhere and everything else around that. How have you seen kind of that shift, or have you seen a shift at all when it comes to like looking more for that human connection and community, and kind of that type of aspect that maybe we took a little bit for granted just a few years ago with how we operate in our workspace, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something too, in fact, I'm writing this week in my newsletter about AI slop, and that's too because there's so much that we are producing with AI, and there's so much out there that almost the way that we were connecting on LinkedIn or, whatever, that it almost like you wonder, like, am I talking to somebody's AI, whatever bot almost, or am I, like whatever, is it really their thoughts that I'm exchanging ideas with or not, and so I think that's where the connection between people is becoming that much more important, where you really want to, not if you can connect with people in person, I think that's something that is really there's a premium on that. And then also, because since the pandemic, so many people still live in so many different cities that if you can't connect in person, then it's becoming that much more important to connect, in communities virtually like this and through podcasts. I think that, we really feel like because we can hear the voice and see people, we connect in a way that sort of we invite them in, right? I- I- and and so I think that's really important now in a way to for that connection, because the connection between humans is so important. But yeah, when we start talking about AI, boy, there's a lot going on with AI. I do interesting how AI is making that human to human connection so much more critical
Mm,
too. It's definitely
yeah,
dynamic.
yeah, no, definitely. And I think as where with the work that I do with AI, for example, and you see kind of how many businesses are really accelerating what they're doing through AI, and proper business context AI agents and these things. It's leaving kind of less time or less work for the humans to do compared to what they did before of those old tasks, whatever they might have been, but it's just freeing them up to do much more impactful work. And a lot of that impactful work really is the human connection. It's target to
Yeah.
client, or their customers in different aspects internally. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic, I think, where we see successes where they're taking that and translating into like more human connection through
Yeah.
more AI versus replacing or removing the human connection altogether. And to piggyback off that a little bit as well, obviously, today in most businesses that we see out there, and I'm sure most of the leaders that you work with on the Step Up Exchange side or
Yeah.
with your executive coaching, AI is no longer nice to have. You should try it, see what you can do with it. It's a must have. It's a must implement in the actual business in one way or another, top down, right?
Yeah.
How do you kind of advise or recommend that leaders think about it? Because it's a pretty big shift, especially if you look at customer success or go to market, all these kind of different functions, to like truly implement it in the workflow versus using it as like a side tool, kind of ChatGPT style. It's a very different thing to do that, right? What's your approach to that?
Yeah, I think AI and agents, especially, are really changing the nature of work quite a bit. And it's funny because my husband works in finance, but they have been adopting Claude at their company right now. And what he used to talk about was just not having enough time to produce everything. But now, what his challenge is that he doesn't have enough time to, like with everything that Claude is producing, to check it all. Right. And I think that that's one of the initial challenges right now, and where we get into the danger of AI slop, right, is that if you're not closely checking the analysis, whether it's looking at the numbers or the translation of what those numbers or other things mean, right, or maybe it's creating an email or something else. But if you're not closely looking at it and you know really taking it apart to decide if it's something that should represent you, right? That, like, I'll use AI to help me, say, with a LinkedIn post or something, but I will look at it very closely, right? Does it sound like me? Is it transitioning the way that I think it should with the logic? Is it is it really something that I would write? Not just in terms of the sound, but in terms of the ideas, right? And when you're looking at numbers or the analysis that it's bringing up, how the context that we provide to AI is the most critical layer right now that I think companies are trying to find ways to build. And it's not enough to just connect an MCP. I think what you really have to do is take a look at what files you have it looking at and if it's picking up everything. If I'm instructing Claude to look across all of the files and then it tells me that it's choosing just a few, I stop it and I say, no, I instructed you to look at all of these files, kind of thing. Because it's almost like at the time when it's generating, while you're building the agent, you have to be really careful that it is constructing it in a way that has the context that it needs so that it's actually doing the type of work that it's at the the quality that you would produce. So we can produce more once we get the agents trained on the context as it should be. But then we also need to check those agents, right? And then it becomes a job of not just checking what it's producing for that moment, but also checking, on a regular basis. And that becomes part of the routine then on a weekly basis, is not only having those agents sort of do a loop and update what is in your whether it's a skill or however you're constructing your agents, but also making certain that it is working off the correct context, that it's incorporating things as things evolve, because business is changing so quickly too, right? And I just think that, there's just so many ways we need to be careful as we're constructing, the architecture as well as the context for the agents right now. We can move very quickly and we should, but we also need to move very carefully, I think.
Mm. Yeah, I love that point of view. And I have found myself not giving all of my thinking to AI. Like now I sit more with it and I'm trying to add more substance because now everybody it sounds the same on LinkedIn or on Instagram. So I've been more intentional about the way that I use AI. Um and Jan, since I'm having an opportunity to interview you, I'm going to pick your brain about any sort of like strategic frameworks or sort of like mental models that have served you well or that you perhaps like to teach to some of the leaders that you coach.
In terms of thinking about the architecture or the context, or just generally how you
Ah,
approach it, or
general, yeah.
well, let me go to architecture in a way, actually, because I
Okay.
think, when you're working with AI, you want to think about inputs and outputs, because it can do so much in the middle that you don't have to necessarily instruct it to do all the steps, because the way a machine would do something is different than the way a human would do it anyway. And so I think, though, if you can be intentional about what inputs you provide and being very specific about the outputs that you're looking for and the why, in the same way that humans need the why, I think it's helpful to provide that context to AI for the why as well. And then the other thing, one of the reasons why I really like Claude as an LLM model is because you're creating your own markdown files that then you own, right? And so when you're creating files about your tone or your voice, or who you are, who your customer is, or if you're writing who your audience is, things like that, it's so critical to have files that you are developing and maintaining that are your own for that. And I think that's one reason why I really like using Claude, is because it's not locked up in somebody else's machine. It's on my machine, the one that I own. And that's really important, because I think that a lot is going to be changing in all of these models, and which ones we work in will change. And so I want to be able to be as mobile as possible, to be able to make those independent decisions about which ones I want to use. So I guess that's, if there's any sort of advice more generally, I guess that's what I would say, is make certain that you're maintaining your your own voice, your own um, IP, right? And that's something too that gets a little tricky when you're working with a company, because there is the context of the company, but there's still what you bring to it individually. And so you want to be sure that you're also thinking about your own thought leadership and your own voice, and how you're, maintaining that, as well as then what you're developing for your company. And that's fine if the part that you're developing for your company belongs to them, because you don't have as much use for it once you leave that company and go to another, right? In terms of describing the product and how it works, or that customer base and that sort of thing. But I think what our takeaways are, and what our voice is, and what we're learning overall, as we were talking earlier about, like, the different roles we may have over time, right? That's the kind of IP and that perspective that I think is uniquely ours, that we want to be sure that we can use efficiently and effectively when we're working with AI. And so by creating those documents, then that's a way of sort of creating that second brain of our own that is so critical as we are independent, players out in the marketplace, right? You were mentioning earlier about like the having different cross-functional roles and that sort of thing. Some of the leaders that I'm working with, they're going on and becoming go-to-market leaders, GMs, COOs, and I think that that's another thing too, is I don't think that that means like OCS, has been abandoned. I think that what we want to do is take our understanding of the customer and the company and being at that intersection, and use it across the business. And I think that's something that's really important no matter what role we're in.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I definitely see the value on that. And Jan, with all the experience that you've had, what would be the best career advice that you have received?
That I've received? Hmm.
Yes.
That I've received, because I give a lot of career advice, like every day I'm giving career advice. But in terms of what I've received, wow, I think it's been a while since I've gotten some career advice. But mostly, I guess it's just been to not be afraid to try the unknown. There's been and I think too, I've always been very self-directed, where I've always had sort of a plan that I kind of create, and then if I get off course with that plan, I'm actually okay with it. And I think that's the other thing too, is where there's been people in my career who have let me explore and have been supportive of, as long as it's bringing something back to the business, then letting me explore how that might work has been really helpful. And I think I've had the opportunity to just be an intrapreneur, like building things
Mhm.
inside companies pretty often in my career. And that's been something that where people have trusted me to do that has been really helpful. And I guess what eventually led me to becoming an entrepreneur, and feeling comfortable in building my own thing. So, if you get the opportunity to do something like that at a company, go for it. If I can pay it forward in terms of the opportunities I've been given.
I
Yeah, I
love
love
the
that.
concept of entrepreneurship within a company.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's always fun building when you have support around you too. You know,
Yeah.
you don't
Especially,
get that as an entrepreneur, do you, Hadar?
no, it's you get the building, but not the support. So you got to figure it out without it. But it's really fun. And I've myself being an entrepreneur, but also worked previously in a business or businesses that function similarly, where it's like you can do your thing within the bigger context. Both gives you a lot of, I think, acceleration in your learning and your development, testing, and being kind of out in the deep end of the pool very early on in your career. I think it's always a good thing, um, especially if that support system exists around you, so you don't have to kind of sink or swim all by yourself, but you get that help. So I think that's really helpful. And as you've been talking about some of these topics, Jan, one thing I was curious about is how do you see some of these roles that we've seen, more traditional roles, right? Whether that's in CX and CS that you focus a lot on, um, CS director and different leaders. We have kind of that development of the CRO role, which is kind of a sales director that became a CRO, and now we just rebranded it. But as these roles have developed, kind of how do you? And we talked about advice just now that you've gotten, and you said you give advice every day. Where do you see the roles, the titles, the job functions over the next few years shift towards?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's a lot changing in all of that. In terms of CROs, I've actually guided and supported a number of CS leaders who have become CROs, and I think that that's something I love seeing that. There are CS leaders who've been in sales before, or sometimes there are CS leaders who haven't been in sales, but they just work at understanding the prospect motion and in order to become CROs. And I really do like seeing CS leaders become CROs because I think that it is so critical today. Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of blending going on, right? But it's so critical. We, as CS leaders, have always had a trove of information that's been so critical for the business, right? In understanding your customer and who's successful, bringing that back not just to product so that they can build for what customers need, but to bring back who those successful customers are and why they're is successful and what attributes they have, who they are, is really critical for marketing and sales because that product market fit that they're really trying to go for, that really the company's trying to go for, you can't really get there unless CS leaders are helping the others, leaders understand that. right? Even for engineering, which product is often working closely with engineering about what to build, but it's to help the engineering leaders understand who the customers are and all of that. And I think that it's incumbent on every function to understand the customer and to understand that voice, whether they're working directly with them or not. And increasingly, I think a lot more of them are. But also, what I see in CS is that because the business model, this is why the financials, the business model is always such an integral part of business. As we know, you got to keep the lights on, right? And that's what CS is doing, is keeping the lights on, by customer revenue and growing it and that sort of thing. But when you take a look at what's happening with the business model, we're moving more, because of the cost of AI compute, we're moving more to either consumption or usage models or outcome models, right? And so when you think about those outcome models or usage models, they only will produce revenue for the company if the customer is successful in using them, because they're not going to consume more, use more, unless they're getting some sort of value. Or if, and literally the outcome model is that they receive value and that's what they pay you for, right? And so when you're thinking about that, then it's so much more important to work with the customer early on in how you construct the contract to begin with, how you're thinking about their tech stack, how you're able to onboard them and build, the implementation, that any sort of integrations they may need, so that they can work as quickly as possible, to start to achieve value using your product. Because for every day, week, month that they're not getting that value, they're not paying you. And that is a day that you can't go back and get paid for. It's like the airplane that takes off without the seat filled. The same idea, right? And so think about how that changes things. That's why you see, whether it's a forward deployed engineer or a forward deployed, whatever, there's all different kinds of roles, right? Whether it's for legal, medical, or, like different types of products. But you really need to understand, and this is funny, because you were talking about a generalist, right? And I think that while it's helpful to understand how everything works in a business, also what you need to be is more specific on an industry and that marketplace, because you want to really understand that customer and what's their tech stack and how does that play into your what you offer and how you integrate with their tech stack. And the more specific you can be in understanding an industry, the more valuable you are as a contributor with in your company and to your customer, right? And advising them and guiding them to get set up properly and using your product so that they're going to be successful that much faster, right? And then you're really just trying to develop the product to so that they need it even more, they can use it even more, right? And so that's where you're getting into the expansion. And yeah, there certainly are going to be some commitment levels, but because especially like if you get into usage, then you have to make certain that that usage is aligned. And if they are using more than what they've committed to and it's outside of the budget, then that becomes as much of an issue if they're using more as if they're using less, and how you're guiding them. So there's a lot of things at play in terms of how you're guiding and working with your customer that are different dynamics than what we're used to. And that doesn't mean that we don't have jobs to do, because some people somehow think that CS is going away, or if because we're so engaged in understanding their business model and ours, that changes the CS work. And now no one wants to be a CSM. I saw a post today saying that like people are leaving CS and they're disheartened because it's so sales oriented. And I'm just like, not really sure what that means because we were always about the business,
Yeah.
right? Like if you weren't helping your customer's business, why did they come to you in the first place? They certainly didn't come because they needed to tell someone about their vacation and their dogs. like or their kids or something, you know what I mean? Like you build those relationships with people because you're human, but that wasn't why they came to your company. They came to your company to solve a business problem. And if you're not helping them solve that business problem, well, yeah, they're going to churn no matter how much fun you have, talking about whatever, you've built your relationship about. Right. So,
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
there's
No,
a
that's
lot,
great.
maybe a lot to unpack there, but
Yeah.
I went in a lot of different directions.
No,
But
that's great. That's great. Because I think, it's funny, right? Because there's so many different, like I said, there's many directions to this. And, you talk about the generalist versus specialist, but they're
Mhm.
really not, in a sense, mutually exclusive what you describe, because it's okay,
Yeah,
specialized in a vertical, but you need to
yeah,
understand the full business and how to implement your product and the marketing side and business side and bring that all together. So it's just different levels of these layers. And I also kind of feel like the conversation over the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's always been the same. There's always a new challenge, a new thing, things shift, and you have these conversations across different functions,
yeah,
CS. Are we creating value for the customer or are we selling? Those two things are the exact same thing. When you're creating value, you are selling. That's why you have the customer. That's why they're there, like you described.
yeah.
And maybe just a quick follow up on this before we get into our last section here of the conversation. But because you've been doing this for some time, right? Advising,
I've
working, helping people
I've
for
been
many,
in
many
tech
years.
since the .com days.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like you've done this for some time now.
Yeah.
What do you feel there's a difference with like the executives that you work with today? Like the number one challenge that they're facing in this AI world, is it different than it was before, or is it just the same thing repackaged, right? And we have high pressure, a lot of expectations. We need to deliver this, but we only have that. Like at the end of the day, is it different, or is it kind of just a new package of the same thing that leaders have been doing for, decades?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's a bigger shift right now, in part because of the speed. When the .com era was coming about, there was a lot of hype and everything, but it really took some time before, like now, like if a restaurant doesn't have a website or an Instagram page or something, they're not represented digitally. It almost doesn't exist, right? And so and that's a physical place, right? And so it took some time for that to happen. Even mobile, right? When, that was another big shift going to mobile, but that also took some time. And it's been evolving over time. But when you take a look at AI, and the speed in terms of the change. And now, even though we've seen since the beginning of 25, I think we saw that agents were going to be a thing, but now with I think it's really been coming together these past 6 months, and it's just the speed of change has been really intense. And I think that's what's hardest for people, because when you think about, you get used to going to the grocery store in the same way. You get used to, you know, building your presentations in the same way. And when all of a sudden there are new ways to do really basic things, then all of a sudden it's a lot of, well, it's just a lot of work, actually, just like the neural pathways you have to build to support that change. If we already are making, I don't know, what is it? Is it like 30,000 decisions a day or something crazy, right? Like we're
Yeah.
doing like this astronomical, I don't know, maybe it's only 3,000, but it's something like that. There's like thousands of decisions you're making that you don't realize you're making, because instead of making the decision, we have a neural pathway that says, go and do this. So if you have a routine in how you wake up in the morning, right? You're not really thinking about it. That's why sometimes you don't know if you put the milk in the cupboard and the toilet paper in the refrigerator, because you're like doing it by rote, right? Like you're kind of like, oh wait, let's switch, kind of thing, right? Because you're just on automatic. And when so much is changing, you can't be on automatic. And I think that's the hardest thing. It becomes emotional too, right? Like we're literally wired to resist change. That's one of my favorite books is by Britt Andreatta is Wired to Resist. And it's all about change and how our brains react to it. And I think one of the more important skills that and qualities that we can actually build up right now is change leadership to really help our teams and our customers and our company get through this change. And, not everybody reacts to change with enthusiasm. Although I really like it, there's also things that like when little things are changing, like, I open something up and now I have to go and find things. It can't help but sort of piss you off, right? Like you're like, I just want to go and do this thing. And now
Yeah.
it's different, right?
Mhm.
And so with so much change surrounding us, I think that's really the biggest challenge. So I think it's maybe more meditation perhaps, or, more opportunity to sort of give ourselves a break and to give ourselves, and to really open ourselves up to change and to try things. Um, One other thing I was just writing about recently too is that, you want to focus on what you're changing. You want to think about, just focus on learning one thing and trying to apply it so that then the other things that are creating noise, you can sort of file those away and get to them when you're ready to the next, for the next thing. Um, because if you're going to build new practices and habits, chances are you're going to build it. And this kind of gets to atomic habits, where you sort of build, one habit on top of another, right? And insert habits within habits. And so you may not change everything all at once, but try to change things, at least small things, so that then you can build on it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, and I think we could do a whole show with a few hours on just like the mental models and the way
Oh,
people
yeah.
learn and retain and all this stuff. So I think that stuff is really interesting and plays such a big part in just our work life and everything else that we're doing. But awesome, John. We've actually been running through our conversation today, and we are at the end. And what we'd like to do at the end of it is do this lightning round, so rapid fire Q&A, few questions, quick answers back. We try to keep it light, nothing too difficult for you to answer quickly, hopefully here. Yeah, what do you say? You ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right, perfect. So let's start easy. What we've been talking about a lot here. The biggest risk with AI today is
Not trying it.
excellent, and the biggest opportunity with AI today is
Building slowly but surely, building on top of whatever you've tried, so you can build simply and then build on top of each thing that you're building, if
yeah,
consequentially,
yeah, that makes sense. And
consecutively.
yeah, and let's pretend we have a time machine, Jan, and we fast forward 12 months into the future, and we're sitting here in 12 months. You're looking back at the past year. What would you like the headline of that year to be?
Mm, Transformation. That would be the headline. Yeah, because I think that there's just going to be more changing in CS, more changing in our companies, more changing in how we work. What we're doing with agents, I think, is going to really open up. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of transformation in this next year.
Beautiful. And Jan, what's one thing that you're grateful for right now?
Mm. Community, definitely. People.
The best. And what's one word you want this year to be about, or the remainder of the year?
Empowerment.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jan, it's been such a pleasure having you on. So many amazing insights. I know this is going to be a hit with all our listeners, and we really appreciate you taking the time. We know it's early morning in Los Angeles, so thank you for joining us today, Jan.
It was great to see you again. And thank you so much for asking me to be a part of your podcast. I really enjoyed it. It's great to see you.
So excited for this episode. Thank you so much, Jan.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Success Revenue Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, and also give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.